Hey, it's working this time. It's Minister Conway. I'm here with Brother Philip. We're going to do our Sunday service review. Met a new pastor who's recently arrived into town. Not new in the ministry, but new to Stephenville. And so we fellowshiped at that church today. And Brother Philip, what did you learn today?
Today, the pastor talked about trust. Trust is very important. Something that a lot of people in this day and age don't have, and is very hard to earn. Now, what the pastor talked about today was talked about the story of Daniel in the lion's den, and how he had faith and trust in God to keep him safe whenever he was sentenced to be in the lion's den, because, or premises behind that, Daniel was getting to be very high up in the order of kings, and below the kings servants and all that stuff. He was it went kings, Daniel, and then a bunch of other bosses, and then people and stuff like that. And a bunch of those bosses were mad that Daniel was so popular and so high up in the pecking order. And is that the right way to use that, pecking order?
I guess, yeah. Well, he was. I mean, they did bring out the whole point that he was a slave, and I do want to caution on that, because a lot of times I think we look at that in biblical times and we say, well, Daniel was a slave and this person was a slave and Joseph was a slave and these people are all slaves. And we've got to be very careful in our contemporary culture to acknowledge that the slavery of the biblical times was not the same as slavery of today of the South in America. So we want to make sure we draw that line, because I have been in a church or two or three or four where the pastor made it very pointed that slavery was approved by the Bible, and I'm like, not slavery the way that we did it, because if you stop and think about, and this wasn't supposed to be a political rant, but since I'm already going there, Daniel and his contemporaries were educated in all the king's arts, and slavery in the United States purposely tore apart families and refused to educate. In fact, people were lynched for simply trying to learn how to read. So anyway, let's go back to Daniel and the actual sermon that was actually preached today. Go ahead, Brother Philip.
Yeah. Oh, well, most of it's my.
Wait, let me just cry. The pastor of this service had nothing to say about anything that I just said. Okay, I'm just inserting myself into that process. Go ahead, it's all you.
Most of my talk is already over, because it was just Daniel and having faith, or when one of the bosses who were under Daniel made trick to the king into passing a law where Daniel couldn't serve or pray to God.
Well, they weren't under Daniel. They were the king's advisors and stuff.
At the time, yeah.
But they were worried about him usurping their place.
He was going to get moved up. He was going to get moved up.
That's the trajectory he was on, yes.
He was going to get moved up to be above them, and they were not happy about that. And so they came up with the thing to get him put in the lion's den.
Ow. Do I need to pause the video?
No, I'm back.
Y'all pray for this child. It's been a long first wiki week of varsity football.
I'm tired. And so, just to have a faith in God that He will deliver you from a den full of hungry lions. Shut their mouths so you can spend an entire night in there.
And that was the Lord for sure.
For sure. If you didn't have faith in God to deliver you through that, then...
we don't think the king went and snuck them some food first, because the king was freaking out about whether or not Daniel was going to survive. So we know nobody snuck the lion. That was the power of God.
Because they were hungry lions.
They were hungry lions, but Daniel trusted them.
Lord delivered.
What's interesting about this story of Daniel is a lot of times people want to use how the Lord delivered Daniel in that scenario and in the later one of the fiery furnace. But what we don't realize is that Daniel had been following the Lord since a youth. He had a track record with God. He built his faith in the small things, like whether or not to even eat the king's food once they were brought to the palace and stuff like that. And so we want to start now to build that layer of faith in our lives, so that we build that faith muscle, if you will, so that when time comes to be tested, we really can trust God. All right, well, that's all I have for you. Do you have anything else? Okay, well, thank you for watching. Y'all take care and be blessed.